We're really excited to be talking to Jimmy Dore, a comedian, host of the Jimmy Dore Show. Welcome.
Well, it's amazing how you can feign excitement like that.
I mean, I am excited. Sorry, I'm so
Really
dry.
excited?
You're gonna have to do the opening, whatever. Hey.
Oh, hi, Katie.
Is that good?
How are you, Katie?
Good. How are you?
It's good to see you. Did a great job
too.
on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, I did. Jimmy's show. It was great, and I have to say, something really moving about your show at the end of the show. And Jimmy's a comedian. Obviously, he's really funny. But at the end of your show, you actually started everyone in the room chanting, "All wars are bullshit."
Correct.
And it was really moving. I have to admit, I couldn't chant along with it because I was afraid I was going to cry. But I was like, oh my God, it's so rare to hear this. And I thought that was kind of a great example of your purpose. You're very funny, you're very angry, but you really do have a very important message that's actually, as corny as it sounds, it's very pro-human. Like, you actually like people, as angry as you come off, and you're angry because you like people. So,
that's right.
Can you describe for us what your show is? Like, how do you describe your show? Because it is an interesting combo of different things.
So I like to describe my show as what the Daily Show would be if it wasn't hosted by a millionaire and produced by a giant corporation.
Is that where you got the concept? Were you watching the Daily Show and thinking, this is how I would do it if I had a...
So I was, it all started in 2006. The UCB Theater opened in Los Angeles, and they asked me if I would do a show. And at the time, I had hurt my back, so I was watching a lot of TV news, and I just couldn't get over it. I couldn't get over how bad it was. I couldn't get over it, and I wanted to show everybody. And so when they asked me to do that show, I was like, I know what I'll do. I'm going to just show video clips of the news, and people are going to freak out. So it was right when, the Daily Show was huge, and Jon Stewart pioneered that kind of genre of video, how to use it. And so I learned a lot from watching him and whatever, but there's a lot to it, using video in a live setting. And so it took a while for me to figure out how to do it right and correctly. And that's all started at the UCB Theater when I started doing, it was a show called Pop and Politics, which led to my hour special on Comedy Central, which was called Citizen Jimmy. And that led to me then getting on the Young Turks, which then led to the Jimmy Dore Show.
What was the first material that you were doing?
From what I remember, it was just about the ridiculousness of the news going along with the Iraq War and stuff like that. So now people pretty much get it. But still, people turn to MSNBC as like it's some kind of alternative news programming instead of being produced by the exact same people that they're supposed to be. That's the theme of my show, is that the problem with the news is that they're owned and funded by the people they're supposed to be investigating and exposing. And of course, you're not going to get the news that you need to know about from those people, which is why we're in 8 wars that nobody gives a shit about. 80% of the people live paycheck to paycheck. 50% Americans can't afford like a $400 emergency. 30 million Americans don't have health. I mean, that's because the people who bring us the news are all owned by the people who want to keep that status quo. I mean, that's not anything new, but it's for really rare to hear for some reason, even in comedy. Right now it's kind of a sad time for comedians because they've been sucked into this Russiagate bullshit. And instead of debunking it and standing up to Red Scares, they play right along with it. Every late night talk show, first of all, there's no even reason for those shows to exist. Who the hell would go home? So I was watching Conan O'Brien the other day, just for not the right reasons.
Right.
And
were you high?
So yes, so they announced Andy Richter's podcast. He has a new podcast. And I was like, wow, maybe they'll talk about something interesting on that podcast, because they never fucking talk about anything interesting on this 22-minute show he does a night, which is why podcasts are big now. Why would you go watch that show when you can watch, someone speak interestingly? Joe Rogan outdoes all of them.
Right.
Joe Rogan, the host of Fear Factor, who announces guys fighting in cages, is a better talk show host than all these millionaire, zillionaire guys.
And also, he and you have more reach now than... Are you amazed? I'm always amazed that people in the business are not aware of how little impact they're having as opposed to what they used to have. I mean, people like you, Joe, you're actually bigger media properties now, really, than a lot of these cable outlets.
Well, it's because they can get something, from us that they can't get anywhere else. People want to have funny, interesting conversations about politics. They turn on Bill Maher. They're getting corporate claptrap. That isn't insightful one bit. That show, So I am surprised when powerful people recognize me publicly. Like when Neera Tanden, who's the president of the Center for American Progress,
Very familiar,
We're big
yeah.
Neera fans.
Yeah.
Sarah.
came at me on Twitter. It was like, oh, I thought you were going to pretend to not notice me
Right.
your whole life.
Right.
But it's bothering her so much that I outed her for the fascist war criminal that she really is, because she got revealed by WikiLeaks that she wanted to steal the oil in Libya. She was advocating for stealing their oil so we could fund more in interventionist wars, because if we don't, we're going to have to cut social programs at home, and that
Right.
would piss people off. So in order to keep being able to do these foreign wars, we better start stealing their oil. That was Neera Tanden
Right.
revealed by Julian Assange, and now she's advocating for his imprisonment and
Right.
death, right?
Right.
And so I just called out, no, you're the real fascist. So the fact that
Oh, yeah.
I do a video that she watches and then she actually tweets about it, it's like, oh my God.
Thanks for the PR.
I'm
for the
I'm a
free
drunk
press.
nightclub comedian who smokes pot in the morning in my garage, and it's bothering these people. Why? Because there is no adversarial journalism in this goddamn country, and it's up to people like me.
Right.
And that's why our country's in such a bad shape, when it lands on the shoulders of people like me to be the anti-war voice.
Right.
You know, it's we're in a sad state of affairs.
And of course, she tweets like, when Jimmy Dore harasses me, I just ignore it. Cut to her tweeting about Jimmy Dore
Right, yeah.
allegedly harassing her. It's like an interesting way of ignoring it. How many? She's like 90,000 followers or something.
Yes.
And she's got a whole network of trolls that
Oh
are.
my
that,
God,
That's right.
Yeah, I
yes,
mean,
yes,
that,
yes,
it's
yes.
not just her individual
Yeah, we should do
thing.
a game like Guess That Troll. Name which Neera troll it is.
Yeah, no.
I mean, look how bad it is. Sirius XM has a progressive news channel, which is the opposite of a progressive news
Right.
channel.
Run by
It's run
Zerlina
by-
Maxwell,
yes,
the Hillary Clinton.
who's the most anti-progressive person in the world. She hates Bernie. She constantly
Yeah.
she lies about him
Yeah.
publicly. She's caught and outed. And by
Yeah.
the way, it doesn't hurt her. She doesn't, because
Right.
when you lie at the behest of the establishment, there's never a price to pay.
Yeah.
Ever.
You fail upwards.
That's right.
Fail forward. Yeah. No, I don't know if you remember this. One of her greatest hits of dishonesty was when she just said that she clocked it, and Sanders, during his kickoff speech in Brooklyn, didn't mention race or gender until 20-something minutes in. And people were like, wait, he's literally he's on film mentioning these things 5 minutes in. Like, I feel like liars used to be better at it, but I guess it's this entitlement and this impunity that lets them actually say things that are totally debunkable.
In this media environment, if you I think the Russia story is a great example.
Oh, yeah.
Just keep going forward, just keep saying the next thing, and the news cycle will never
Right.
catch up to it.
Exactly, that's exactly right. And someone, I forget who, made the analogy that in the West, in the Old West, when they would form a posse, they would always bring a couple extra horses for when their horse got tired, they would just jump on the other horse. And that's what Russiagate turned out to be. That they just, oh, really? So there's no Russiagate? Well, we're going to jump on the obstruction horse, and we're just going to
Right,
keep riding
right.
it, and without taking a breath.
Right.
And we're just going to keep going. And so that's what I thought. I thought, I was hanging on. I thought the Mueller report was going to set everything straight, right? And I was at the Young Turks at the time, and they were...
Well, it's kind of like an abusive relationship. Like, you keep hoping that there's going to be a breakthrough,
Yeah.
right? You're like, it's going to change now. Once we see this with the Mueller...
If I just do
Yeah,
good work, if I just
exactly.
keep my head down and keep doing good work,
Yeah.
and, well, I don't put my head down, but I
Right.
do keep doing good work and screaming it at the top of my lungs, maybe everything will turn out good.
Right,
no,
right.
That's
And you-
not how
yeah,
it works.
right.
People have no idea how unnews the news is.
Right.
I mean, there's also the issue of people, when they watch the news, they don't realize they're watching a consumer product. I mean,
Exactly.
I mean, that's the other thing that drives me. People, well, they're just telling the truth. Look, do you think it's a public service that they're doing? I mean, this is a money-making corporation, right? I mean, there's a profit incentive in terms of every piece of content that you see.
Worse, it's the people in the business, right? The people who consider themselves journalists, who have no idea how they've been groomed for that job since they were in kindergarten. Right, because if they thought a different way, I was at some kind of meeting in San Francisco, a bunch of journalist types, and I always get uncomfortable around those people. And I was on a panel, and there was a guy, regular journalist guy, award-winning guy, and he always likes to start off, "Well, you're not a journalist, right?" That's what he says to me, and I'm like, well, did you go to school for journalism? You got your degree? And of course he didn't.
Right.
He's like, of course, me neither. We're exactly the same. All journalism is taking your head down the street and seeing what's happening. That's called journalism. And they can't even fucking do that.
Right.
And so when he's like, when we're in these editorial meetings talking about war, we don't talk like that. We don't talk like you think we talk. And I go, well, isn't it amazing that every news organization is always for every war, even though you guys don't have secret meetings? How does that happen?
Right.
How does that happen? happen? That's because you're chosen. Just like
Right.
broadcast news. Have you guys not known how this works? You're chosen. Guys like me are not chosen to work for companies like yours. And if they do, they fire my ass. They fire Chris Hedges when he told the
Exactly,
truth
yeah.
about the Iraq. They fired Phil Donahue. They fire Ed Schultz just for covering Bernie Sanders. And people still turn into MSNBC as if they're getting the news. And Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes didn't quit when that happened.
Jesse Ventura, they unhired him.
That's right.
He's still living in a house he
Casa
calls
de
Casa
MSNBC, right?
Casa MSNBC
Casa
that he paid
MSNBC,
for with the money that they had to pay him for the
His contract.
Yeah, exactly. So
And people think that's the news. And then those news people, when you actually do the news or you say something truthful about a war, like I do, they'll smear you.
Right, that's the
And
other
then
thing. Yeah.
And they make you, just like they do to Tulsi, they make you feel icky.
Yeah.
About when, I think I heard you say that, actually. That's the point of propaganda, is to make you feel icky when their name comes up.
yeah, you create an ick factor around
Yeah,
somebody, and
exactly.
people are afraid to associate with that person, retweet anything like that.
I've said this before. There's a visceral feeling you get when someone you know is smeared, or someone you retweet is smeared, or someone you've had on your show is smeared. I get it, at least, and I've said this on Twitter. And I say it because I want people to know that there is this pressure that people feel. Like, I think that people don't get it. There really is, like, the ick factor works even when you know that it's wrong. Like,
Yes.
the difference is whether or not you give into it, but it's
Right.
there. There is this collective pressure. And we were just saying how people say the same thing again and again, and they lie and lie. And it really, the other part of that is, for that to work, you do have to smear people, and you have to have this ick factor, so that reason and facts is kind of outweighed by those other things, right?
course.
That's what lets you ignore the reasons and facts, because you're getting this emotional zone where it's like, oh, this person, they're just a bad person. Like facts aside, this person's just an sadist, an apologist, and then you don't have to look at the content, right? Which is what we saw with Kamala Harris and Tulsi Gabbard. As long as you employ a smear, that trumps everything else. And you get that a lot.
I just was called racist because I won't have Andrew Yang on my show, who I had on my show.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, I've had him on. We talked for like an hour. It's a weird thing to see people weaponize. That's the term, right? Weaponize identity
Yeah.
politics. That's what that's called,
Yeah.
right? It's weird to be the victim of that and see people do it so disingenuously and do it. Like, to accuse someone of being a racist falsely, to me, is, I don't know if it's as bad as actually being a racist, but it's certainly just as immoral.
So I have a question for you about your political evolution. You said, like, in 2006, you were doing stuff at UCB. You were already aware of the MSNBC stuff, the MSNBC bias, right?
Right.
Did you go
But I
kind
still
of...
but that's when they went and got Keith Olbermann. So I'm like, well, maybe they'll be good.
Right.
And, I was really a big Keith Olbermann fan at that time. Like a lot of people were. Also
Yeah.
sad to see what happened.
I mean, I know that I will look back at things that I wrote and said, and I kind of cringe. But did you have an evolution where you were more like...
Yes.
Well, so can you talk
So
about that?
the big moment for me was when I read Listen Liberal by Thomas Frank.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, I was always lefty and whatever, and, pulling for MSNBC. And
Right.
I always thought it was a left-right paradigm. I always thought it was left-right.
Yeah. And Democrats, Republicans too?
Yes.
Or, okay,
and I
yeah.
couldn't understand Republican. I couldn't understand right wing. I don't get, Ben Mankiewicz used to always say, you can't even talk to these people because it takes 80% of your time just to unwind the crazy, right?
Yeah.
And I felt the same way. Well, I feel that way about Russiagators now.
Right,
You can't
exactly.
even talk to them. So that's when I realized, it's not left, right. It was Listen Liberal. When if you read that book, you can't not be a radical after you read it. Although somehow Thomas Frank manages, and he wrote it. But it just shows you the rot, and said there is no two-party. It's all fake. It's all phony. The words that he said they know how to pay fealty to democracy,
Right.
and they know how to pay fealty to liberalism, but they don't. Then they do the exact opposite, right? Like Barack Obama came in power, and he made the banks bigger. People wanted him to break up the bank. He made them bigger.
Right.
He took us from 2 wars to 7. He made the Bush tax cuts permanent. He opened the Arctic to drilling whenever Shell Oil asked. Did it
Right.
twice. There's fracking pipes underneath this country because he lifted the ban from the 70s on exporting fossil fuel. I mean, he's going to let it play out. He let cops crack the heads of peaceful protesters all across this country and occupy Wall Street. I mean, there was no difference between electing Barack Obama and electing Mitt Romney. We would have got Romney care anyway. Which is what we got.
And we would have been more critical.
And people would have been
opposed
critical
him.
of this exactly like. So what I said last night during my stand-up set was that the silver lining of Donald Trump is
Yeah.
that people are starting to realize the horrible shit that their government has been doing all along,
Right.
but they weren't aware of it because Barack Obama is such a gentleman,
Right.
and he would never disrespect a woman in public. So, when the Muslim ban was the big thing, And nobody asked themselves, people all got upset, oh, you can't ban Muslims at the airport. And I'm like, well, why do you think the Muslims are at the airport? Why do you think there's so many refugees coming here? So it's Barack Obama bombed the shit out of them for 8 years and nobody cared. Does Barack Obama have to bomb Muslims at an airport for people to finally care about it?
Right.
You hear that Trump's putting immigrants in cages. You find out Barack Obama built those cages. You find out that Trump is now gassing immigrants at the border. So Barack Obama gassed immigrants at the border, and I guess they should feel honored that they were gassed by the lesser of two evils.
That woman, that scary viral clip of that woman who worked for the Justice Department defending like not giving children blankets, not giving them toothbrushes. Remember these judges? So these judges, it went viral. These judges were asking this woman who worked for the Department of Justice how they could, with kids at the border, how they could not give them toothbrushes, how they could not give them toothpaste, how they could not give them blankets. And they were like, you're actually saying that this isn't a violation of their rights? And she's like, well, it depends. You don't have to shower like every day, you could go a week. I mean, it's unbelievable. And what's insane is that she was an Obama appointee and she's a registered Democrat. I guess it's not insane. It's not shocking.
But this Russiagate thing has made people double down on their partisanship.
Yeah, exactly.
I talked to people who were comedian friends of mine, and they're angry at Trump voters. I'm like, you're angry at Trump voters? You have to understand that we're all in this together, and that what made people so desperate to vote for a clown. And if you're such an opposition party, how did you lose to a guy who's a game show host? That's who I want to make fun of. The people who couldn't beat a guy who's a big piece of shit as that. There's really something wrong with you if you can't beat that guy.
Right.
That's a big problem. And so it's just amazing to me to see it's still people get caught up, and that's what Russiagate has done. It's made people double down on their partisanship. It's made them dumb. They say Trump is a divider. They're both. But that's what the elites want. They want us fighting left, right instead of top down, and that's where the real fight is. And as soon as everyone realizes, that's what Fred Hampton realized, which is why they killed him.
Right.
Class is such a taboo in this country.
Yeah.
In the media, we just don't cover it at all. We don't cover class distinctions in any way. We talk about left, right, Republican, conservative, progressive, reactionary,
Yeah.
but we don't do poor, rich. Upper class, lower class. It's just not part of the nomenclature anymore, or if it ever was.
Right.
And there are no working class voices really in the media, right? In the major media, are there?
Yeah,
I mean,
Ed Schultz
there's no
right?
Jimmy Breslins anymore.
Right.
There's nothing, right?
You're right. No
more
Mike Royko.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Even Stephen Colbert, to watch his transformation from doing what I consider to be the best political comedy show in the history of comedy to doing just another watered down Russiagate bullshit show. Did you see his interview with Tulsi Gabbard? It was just shameful. It's just shameful. It's just like
talking points.
It's just so he literally said to her, I think America is a force for good. And it's just like, why don't you just go home? What are you doing this show for?
Right.
What is the point of you? We need another rah-rah fucking voice on a television?
Wasn't that he was satirizing before?
That's what he was.
Exactly.
He became the character he used to make fun of.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so, again, it's just amazing to see these people I've respected and looked up to being better than me and just completely reveal themselves to be just as shallow, empty, and bullshitty as anybody. And I don't even know what he gets out of it. So, what's the difference between having $10 million or $15 million? Stephen Colbert is already Stephen Colbert, right? You're already doing a great show. What do you get out of going now to do that show, which is not as inspired, which is the nicest way to put it. It is not half as inspired as your other show. I don't know what you get out of that.
There's a huge difference between lampooning sort of power, conventional wisdom, all those things, and making jokes on behalf of it, right? I mean, the jokes just die when you try that.
Yeah, right. Well, did you feel a shift, when you started realizing that MSNBC wasn't going to save us? Do you remember feeling a shift? Do you remember it changed your relationships? Did it change your comedy? Going from kind of the standard issue liberal to realizing that whole left-right thing wasn't exactly capturing the world. Did it change the way you did comedy? Did you lose friendships? I feel like
I lost friendships for sure.
Yeah.
Over Russiagate?
Over Russiagate. Yeah.
But earlier, did you? So it seems like there's a couple levels. There's
yes, there was the level of, I wouldn't vote for Hillary Clinton. That lost a lot of friends. And they shamed me. They just voter shame. That's all they have. That's not how politics works. You don't shame people into voting.
Right.
And
I love when they're like, you don't even matter. No one cares about your vote / you got Trump elected. If these people are the ones getting him elected, maybe you shouldn't shit on them.
I said, what I always say is that, I did get Trump elected. I'm very powerful. And if you aren't nicer to me, I'll fucking do it again.
That you can't.
So you better start being.
Choose a narrative.
So it's up to you. You be nice, and I'll vote for your can. But if you're mean to me still, I'm
Right.
going to throw the election again
Right.
because I have that kind of power.
Right.
So that just shows you that they don't really believe that, and they just want a scapegoat that makes them feel better. That's Deborah Messing doing that to Susan
Oh, my
Sarandon.
God.
That is somebody tweeted out, this is the equivalent of Charlie Daniels every day tweeting Benghazi's not going away.
Right.
That's when Deborah Messing tweets that. And
Suddenly Susan Sarandon is like the most important person
She's
in history.
she's a
like,
sorcerer.
And it's just weird, too, because Susan Sarandon is such a major league talent as opposed to Deborah Messing.
I know.
Who's such a pipsqueak of an artist. Of course, that's how it works.
You just talked about something, sorry, I want to back up because I think it's really interesting. We don't talk about it enough. I got into journalism, like I was a writer before I was into politics, and one of the first things about writing is you want to get the widest possible audience. You're writing for everybody, right? Every time you sit down, you're thinking about everybody, right? But the modern media landscape has completely changed in that respect. Most of these shows are targeting one small piece of the audience intentionally. They're already from the start. They're writing off half the audience at least, right? And as you say, it's sometimes 75%. I mean, that's a new thing, right? I mean, now it's suddenly actually a bad thing
Right.
if you're trying to address everybody. I mean,
Well-
do you get flack for that approach, or?
Oh, I get flack for people saying I platform the wrong people,
Right.
or
Or you cater to racists, right? Or cater to racism. That, I feel like, is a part of that argument where
Yes.
if you try to reach people who don't already agree with you, you are playing into the worst in those people.
It's a point of pride to me that people come up to me after every show and tell me I voted for Trump and you changed me. I voted for Trump and you changed me. Hey, I'm a
Exactly.
Trumper, but I like you and I like what you say about the war and this and that. I used to think I just got a text from a Emmy Award-winning comedian who I don't know just yesterday. And he said, hey, so you're in town, and I just want to let you know I thought I hated progressives until I saw your show, but now you're honest, and I get your point of view, and I
great.
appreciate your show, and blah,
Right.
blah, blah. And so I think that I'm more proud of that,
Yeah.
I think, than anything, because again, we're not going to stop the war if it's just the progressives. You have to bring libertarians, independents, and conservatives. You have to get everybody together and stop the wars.
Right.
And you have to get everybody together and break up the banks. You have to get everybody together to realize that it's them against us. It's a class war. And, and we're fighting against a bunch of class holes.
Well, you see that with Sanders, right? If, God forbid, he reaches out to people who may have been Trump voters or would
Yeah.
be Trump voters, that's bad. He's catering to these people. And the solution...
Isn't that politics? I'm just so
Well,
confused.
it's not as in politics, but if you care about the victims of Trumpism, right? Which these people claim to do, the people who say he's catering to racism or racists, if you care about stopping Trumpism, you want to reach these people and convince them to not vote for Trump. If you turn your backs on them and call them deplorables, what do you think they're going to do?
That's bad voter outreach.
It's a bad voter outreach, exactly. And so I think that's so powerful. Like, that is what you're doing through your comedy, is, God forbid, you reach people who don't already agree with us. I mean, that you need to do that in comedy, you need to do that in journalism, you need to do that in politics, or else you lose.
I agree, and guess who's losing right now?
Right.
The country. The country's losing, but guess who's winning? MSNBC, CNN, The Washington Post, The New York Times.
And Fox. I mean, to
And
be
Fox.
fair, they're doing the same thing, but just, yeah. It used to be a business for nonconformist,
Right.
iconoclastic people who dropped out of other professions because they had personal problems or just didn't get along
Didn't
with
get
people,
along.
right? Like that was where you ended up. You fucked up somewhere in your life and you ended up in journalism. And there were a lot of people who were really good at the job who just, that was their personality, right? Now it's completely opposite. The people who succeed in this profession are just like you're describing, right? And it's so
Why
weird.
is that?
Because the culturally and professionally, the business has changed. That, like,
There's
back
only
in the
6 companies, for one thing.
only 6 companies, and after all the president's men, all these sort of upper class kids wanted to get into journalism. A lot of Ivy Leaguers got into it, and they just started hiring.
Yeah.
It's so the people who used to go in were these kind of difficult people,
Right.
and they're just not there.
Yeah,
like
people-
Chris Hedges, they bounced people like that out. That's
Right.
what-
So, one of the prerequisites used to be for being a journalist was that you're not looking to make friends.
exactly,
Right, yeah.
exactly.
Right.
You don't
Yeah.
really have that urge in you to make friends with people. Well, now that's all it is. That everybody's friend. Chris Hayes can have a white nationalist on his show and say, "Thanks for coming on. You're welcome back anytime."
Which one is that?
That was Steve King.
Oh, yeah.
So that's.
Oh, the Iowa.
Yeah,
yeah.
I watched that. My head almost flew off when he did that. I
Right.
couldn't believe it. But I'm just glad I don't have to worry about comedy being, is bad. No, first of all, nobody thinks comedy's important, so you don't have people don't walk around with that imprimatur or that feeling, right? Journalists
Right.
walk around like they're fucking saving the world and they're doing something, and they're not doing anything.
And we can sort of close on this thought, but I mean, if you're in a position of influence, now, do you have to think about that? I mean, your show is kind of stepping into the role that journalism used to occupy for people. People look to you. I mean, do you feel responsibility about that? Do you feel like you have to change your approach?
It's all fun.
It's
to
all
me.
fun. Okay.
It's all fun to me. Like the fact that no one else was debunking Russiagate was like, it was depressing to me because I couldn't commiserate with my friends in the way I wanted to, but it was also thrilling to me. Like, this is amazing. Like, I get to talk about this. This is exactly what I want to do. And if I do, I find myself kind of second guessing myself sometimes, and that's always a mistake because the key to my success is that I don't second guess myself and that I am a loose cannon, and that that's why people like me, and because people are sick and tired of the button down bullshit that they get all the time. And it's okay to be like I am because I am a fucking comedian. And the fact that I can do journalism better than journalists doesn't mean I'm a journalist. It just means that there isn't journalism in America.
Do you think comedy is more like corruption proof than journalism? I mean, you can't fake a laugh, really, right?
It's an
So you're
involuntary.
either funny or you're not,
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
Right.
people can spot a fake laugh.
Right.
If you're not challenging something with your humor, if it's not iconoclastic or brave, it just doesn't work, right? Does it?
Right, it doesn't break through.
Right,
Right.
yeah.
I never thought of it like that, but I don't. There's no way comedy could be as shitty as journalism for that very reason, because comedy still rewards the person who is the innovator. It still rewards the person who's talking truth. It does. It rewards. It also rewards shit too. I
Right, Dennis Miller.
TV and entertainment. Mass media rewards bullshit often,
Right.
but
One last thing I want to ask too,
yeah.
about comedy right now. I mean, does comedy work if you don't have room to fail and cross the
No.
line every now and then, right?
Does not work.
So
Definitely.
isn't it a very difficult environment for comedians right now? Social media is going to blow up on you if you
Right.
go in the wrong direction a little
Problematic.
bit. So are comedians playing it safer now than they have? I mean, politically, whatever. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like,
well, it's weird. It's like, I don't know if they're playing it safer, but it's like edginess gets co-opted immediately. There was a time to be edgy did rape jokes. Remember that? You remember that, Katie, right? There was an insurgence of rape
Right.
jokes. And so it was people trying to out-edge each other,
Right.
but then people just aping shitty edgy.
Right.
And
It's like
not-
being outrageous for the sake of being outrageous
Yes.
without actually saying anything. And the whole punching up, punching down thing, right? Like, it's not edgy if you're making a rape joke, making fun of a rape victim.
Mm-hmm.
You can make a great rape joke making fun of rapists. I mean, that's a whole other discussion.
Right.
And George Carlin made this point, right? You can basically make jokes about anything.
I'm always amazed at how little advantage comedians take of their platform. You walk into a comedy club right now, tonight, you might not hear anything about anything. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They'll be doing bullshit sex jokes or bullshit this joke or that joke, and they might do and if they do a joke, it'll be wrong about Russiagate, or something like that.
Putin comes down the chimney.
Oh my
right?
God.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they have to get booked, right? You have to have a bar owner decide that. And with bar owners, I remember one guy said, I want belly laughs when the checks hit the table. They don't give a fuck. You know what I mean?
Right.
So they don't care if you're working on an artistic piece
Right.
or trying to expand the genre. They don't give that. They want belly laughs. They're selling booze and they want laughs.
Jimmy, thank you so much for coming. It was
thank you so
great.
much. It was great.
Good luck with your show. It's really
Not that
cool.
you need it, but yeah.
Okay, I appreciate it. Going right back at you.
So that was Jimmy Dore.
Yeah, that was.